Good afternoon, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again, and I actually am doing a sort of semi-video response in this particular video. There is a user that most of you who are tied in with the Ron Paul movement or the Liberty movement know by the name of TMOT of GA, or which is short for TMOT of Georgia, who is a very popular blogger who is also a popular supporter of Ron Paul, and he did a video discussing the topic of military service and the American military, and it's titled U.S. Soldiers Are Murderers, and that's a hyperbolic title, and he's actually taking the opposing position to that. And it's got me thinking a little bit about a broader issue that is involved in this particular debate, but it definitely crosses into other subjects, and that is the sheer lack of nuance in discourse, even within the realm of just the liberty movement itself. And I get this kind of stuff all the time where I'm like, isn't there some sort of a rational way of disseminating all of this so that we're not tearing each other apart in the process? And I'm a little bit pessimistic in this regard, but let me just kind of sum up the basic tenet of my problem with this argument here. There is an underlying assumption that's being made by the people that TMOT is arguing with, that the U.S. military is the most directly responsible for all of the killings that are going on and continue to go on to this very day in the Middle East, and probably also in other parts of the world that we may or may not know about. TMOT is opposing by saying that you in turn should be blaming either the president, the politicians that are in Congress, or better yet still, the people that voted those people in. I am finding myself agreeing with both sides to an extent, and let me just sort of sum this up in as simplest a way as possible. All parties that are under discussion here share responsibility in this. Anybody who joins the military voluntarily and doesn't fully understand what's going on here has some culpability. Those who join and do know full well and support what's going on and still continue to do so to this day have even more culpability. But I would also argue that their culpability is lesser than those who currently run the government. And I would also argue that to a large extent the current voting populace has a similarly lower level of culpability as the military, because in large respect they're acting based on fragmented or even outright false information. In fact, I would argue further still that the politicians are slightly less culpable than the media and the people bankrolling the media. I would argue actually that the most directly responsible for what's going on in the Middle East right now are not necessarily the politicians who sign the documents and the orders, not the military that goes over and pulls the trigger, nor the people that vote. I am more focused on the people that put the ideas in the heads of all three of these people, and for those politicians who know exactly what's going on and don't care, I blame the media more for giving them cover. Now, of course, there is a way to get even further into the root of the problem by just stating the entire concept of sidestepping constitutional law and the general premise of binding humanity's tendency towards violence with objective laws is really the ultimate problem here. But even being aware of the idea that it's better to have a system of constitutional law doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to have one. Ultimately, there's plenty of blame to go around. And to an extent, people could levy a charge of guilt at me, because even though I openly protest all of this stuff, I'm not going the route of the tax protester. As much as I hate all of the stuff going on in the Middle East, I don't think it's worth becoming a martyr and going to jail over by refusing to pay my taxes. So, to an extent, it could be argued that I'm responsible for this, at least to a lesser extent than all other parties. But the alternative, going completely against the grain, is something that most people are not willing to take, even if they have the overall knowledge necessary to do so. Very few people, and I will include Cindy Sheehan among those people who do have the courage to do this, actually have the fortitude to go out and say publicly, I refuse to pay into the system, now come and get me. And I think at present they are going after Cindy Sheehan for so-called tax evasion. What she's doing is not tax evasion, it's tax protest. She's saying out front, I'm not paying into the system anymore, I don't support what you're doing, so if you're going to throw me in jail, go ahead and do it. And there's a lot of people that take that route. There are really only two principled reactions to the current state of affairs right now. One is outright political dissent, which is the route that all of the tax protesters and anti-war protesters are taking right now in the streets. Or there is what I would call a covenanted form of dissent, in which one basically severs ties with the principle that allows all of this stuff to go on, yet still finds himself in the midst of it. As such, he sees the money that's being taken from him and used to support all this as a form of theft. Armed theft, to be precise. And that's exactly how I view it. My compulsory taxes constitute armed theft. And I am under no obligation whatsoever, as a result of this, to willfully support the current system in any other way other than monetarily. And furthermore, I am at leisure to take any measures I wish in order to divert through legal means or to otherwise lessen and limit the amount of money that goes into the system in order to prop up this current policy. Ultimately, the success in switching the policy of this entire country will come through a combination of political activism and through civil disobedience or legal disobedience. Behaving in an economic fashion that is legal but nonetheless does not support the current system as it stands. I think this is a happy medium that everybody can agree on. And I would argue that with regards to this entire debate, that the less obnoxious we are to each other, the better. So while all of you might have it in your head that it might be a good idea to take the entire American military who's just following orders and put them through some sort of tribunal system comparable to the Nuremberg trials, number one, that's not a practical outcome for this unless we as a nation are conquered and some other country does this, and then there's no telling where that would end. And furthermore, the Nazis were not the only guilty party in World War II. Let's be honest here. The Allies had their share of atrocities as well. England, France, and America carpet-bombed the entire nation of Germany. And I would dare say that there were plenty of political dissidents in Germany that probably died, along with all the women and children that were probably associated with active supporters of the Nazi Party. And did things in Europe and the rest of the world really get that much better after the Allies prevailed? I mean, if you look at the overall third world, you look at the countries that were taken over by the Bolsheviks, I mean, this whole allusion to the Nuremberg trials and the righteousness of punishing the Nazis, that's propaganda. The Nazis were bad guys, but so were the people that were trying them to a large extent. The issue here is the principle by which the power of evil men stands, not any one particular evil person. And the sooner that we understand that, the better. Until next time, with prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.